Have you ever reached your destination without remembering most of the drive? If so, you experienced something remarkable. For a few moments, your habits were doing the work, while your conscious mind drifted elsewhere. What if many of your daily choices aren't really decisions at all? What if they're invisible routines your brain quietly repeats without asking for permission? The most powerful force shaping your life may not be motivation or willpower. It may be something so familiar that you hardly notice it anymore. Your habits. Every morning begins with dozens of tiny actions. You wake up, brush your teeth, unlock your phone, make breakfast, or pour a cup of coffee. Most of these actions happen with very little conscious effort. These routines aren't signs that you're careless. They're actually one of your brain's greatest achievements. Habits save mental energy so you can focus on new and important challenges. Imagine if every simple action required careful thought. Even getting dressed or making breakfast would become exhausting. Habits free your mind by turning repeated behaviors into automatic patterns. Psychologists describe habits as learned behaviors that become automatic through repetition. The more often a behavior is repeated in a familiar situation, the less conscious effort it requires. Over time, your brain starts recognizing patterns. Instead of asking, "What should I do now?" it quietly predicts the next step based on what you've done before. This ability is incredibly efficient, but it also has a downside. Helpful habits and harmful habits are both strengthened by repetition. Your brain doesn't judge them. It simply learns what you practice. To understand why habits can become so powerful, we first need to explore the hidden system inside your brain that quietly builds these automatic routines, one repetition at a time. Inside your brain, repeated behaviors gradually become more efficient. Instead of carefully thinking through every step, your brain begins creating faster pathways that require less attention each time you repeat the same action. Psychologists often describe habit formation as a simple loop. It begins with a cue, continues with a routine, and ends with a reward. Repeat that cycle enough times, and the behavior starts feeling automatic. A cue can be almost anything: a place, a time of day, an emotion, or even another person. These small triggers quietly tell your brain that it's time to begin a familiar routine. Think about how many people automatically reach for their phone the moment they hear a notification. The sound becomes the cue, and checking the screen becomes the routine. The reward doesn't have to be dramatic. Even a brief feeling of satisfaction, comfort, or relief can encourage your brain to repeat the same behavior tomorrow. This is why habits often feel stronger than motivation. Motivation rises and falls, but habits continue because they rely less on conscious effort and more on automatic repetition. The environment around you quietly shapes your behavior. Objects, sounds, smells, and routines can all become powerful reminders that influence what you do next. That's why changing your surroundings can sometimes be more effective than relying on willpower alone. A small change in your environment can interrupt an old habit before it begins. Breaking a habit isn't about erasing it from your brain. Instead, it's often about weakening an old routine while steadily strengthening a healthier one that responds to the same cue. By now, one thing should be clear. Habits aren't invisible chains controlling your life forever. They're learned patterns, and because they're learned, they can also be reshaped with patience and repetition. If habits are learned rather than inherited, why do they sometimes feel impossible to change? The answer lies in how your brain values familiarity. Once a behavior consistently solves a problem or satisfies a need, your brain begins treating it as the preferred solution, even when a better alternative exists. Imagine coming home after a long, exhausting day. Before you even think about it, your hand reaches for the television remote, your phone, or a favorite snack. It may feel like a conscious choice, But in reality, your brain is responding to a familiar cue with a familiar routine that has worked many times before. This happens because your brain is constantly looking for efficiency. Whenever it discovers a behavior that reliably reduces stress, creates comfort, or delivers satisfaction, it stores that behavior as a shortcut. The next time a similar situation appears, the shortcut is activated automatically. Emotions play an important role as well. Feelings like stress, boredom, loneliness, excitement, or happiness often become powerful habit triggers. Over time, your brain starts linking specific emotions with specific behaviors, creating patterns that repeat almost without notice. The encouraging news is that awareness changes everything. The moment you begin noticing your cues, routines, and rewards, you interrupt the automatic process. That brief moment of awareness creates space for a different choice, and that is where lasting change begins. Modern psychology and neuroscience suggest that habits become stronger through consistent repetition over time. Rather than relying on a single burst of motivation, lasting change usually comes from repeating small, manageable actions until they become familiar. Researchers also emphasize that setbacks are a normal part of learning. Missing one day doesn't erase progress. What matters most is returning to the habit, because every repetition strengthens the pattern you want your brain to remember. Imagine someone who wants to read more books. Instead of forcing themselves to read for an hour every night, they begin with just 5 minutes after dinner. Weeks later, that small routine feels natural. What once required effort has quietly become part of daily life. The next time you want to change your life, don't ask, "How can I become a different person?" Instead, ask, "What small action can I repeat today?" Your future is shaped less by dramatic moments than by the ordinary habits you practice every day. Every habit begins with a single choice. Repeated often enough, that choice becomes a routine. Repeated long enough, it becomes part of who you are. Your brain is always learning. The question is simple. What are you teaching it today?